Hi everyone, I'm Lisa. I am the founder of Almost Fun, and our organization is doing a couple of SAT live streams next week with Fiveable. And tonight I'm just going to answer a couple questions that you have about the SAT, share a little bit about our approach, and how we think about preparing for the SAT. We can offer any tips or strategies that we can go over quickly here, but just wanted to introduce myself and our organization and have some time with you all. So thank you to everyone who's joining. This is my first actual IG Live, and so I'm getting used to all of this, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions that you have about the SAT this year, about any sections that you're not feeling super confident about, or any strategies that you want. To start, I'll give you a little bit of background on how we think about the SAT and how we think about studying. So for us, we believe that the SAT, it can be very hard to study for it if you're not already familiar with some of the concepts in there. So for us, we think that it's easier to study when you're able to use more familiar content. So if you really love Marvel movies, for example, it's easier to study if you're using examples based on Marvel movie dialogue. So for example, if you wanted to learn how to structure sentences in parallel sentence structure, it's easier and it's more enjoyable to learn that using Black Panther dialogue, for example. And so that's what our platform provides. It provides different examples of SAT prep questions that are based on content that you'll be able to find as more familiar, more interesting, and easier to engage with. And then as you progress through the platform, you'll be able to get more questions that are a little bit closer to the SAT, basically as you're mastering these skills. So that's the approach that we take, and we'll go over some of the questions that we have in the SAT stream sessions next week, as well as some strategies on how to think about the different sections and how to approach, canceling out answers or doing process of elimination or figuring out which strategy to use. Okay, I'm seeing a question. Are the College Panda books helpful when studying for the SAT? Yeah, definitely. I mean, it really ranges depending on where you're at in terms of what resource will be most helpful. So if you, in your practice test, practicing, you're seeing that you're scoring less than 1,000, then content like ours is really going to be super helpful for you to master those skills and to get used to and familiar with the types of question the SAT asks. If you're scoring, in the above like 1,200 and you're aiming for that perfect score, then you should definitely be practicing lots and lots of Khan Academy questions, College Board questions. Drilling those questions will be the best for you. How much are the courses and the books? So all of our content is free on the Almost Fun platform. The streams next week will be $5 each, but you can practice questions on our platform, almostfun.org, for free. We'll just be able to provide you some extra strategies next week on how to think about each section, the types of things to be aware of, the types of things to really look out for, specifically how to approach the reading section when you're in a time crunch, because you probably will be on the SAT, so how to really approach that. Any other questions? Let's see. One other thing I'll mention that we'll practice doing in particular during the streams is time management. So we're going to practice, going through the reading section quickly, being able to answer questions quickly and not getting stuck on anything or spending too long on passages. And then specifically for writing, we're also going to help you with, identifying the different types of questions. So grammar questions versus effective language questions, the different types that you want to be aware of. Is there something you recommend in case the SATs are online? So we have been talking closely with the College Board. We haven't heard anything about the SAT being online. I think that mostly they're going to be doing in-person testing. That's the situation as far as we know. We don't know that there's going to be anything specifically online. Oh, like study or prep-wise. Yeah, so I think I mentioned this a little bit before, but if you're struggling with some of the concepts, like let's say you're really having a tough time with the math SAT section, you don't remember trig, or you don't remember how to handle circles and equations and stuff like that, then using our platform is going to be a good way to master some of those skills. So almostfun.org. But if you already are really feeling pretty solid about the test, and you really just need to brush up on a couple of skills, get used to your timing, then you should practice the questions on Khan Academy. You should also do the practice tests on College Board. They have, I think, 10, and keep an eye out for the types of questions you're getting wrong, and make sure that you know exactly what you did wrong so you don't get it wrong again. Do I know if the SAT will still be, okay. Do you know anything about the news about how SAT scores are not going to be used for colleges? Yeah, so I think it's about 50 or so colleges that have said they're not going to require the SAT or ACT. So if you think that you have a really strong application, like you have great grades, you did a lot of extracurriculars, your personal statement is fire, then you don't really need to take the SAT. That should be enough for your college application, for those schools who have said that it's optional. But if you feel like you need a little extra oomph in your application, you maybe did not do so hot in some classes this year, or you're worried about your personal statement, then having a really strong SAT score can be that extra boost. I think in California, actually, for the UC schools, today they decided that the schools aren't able to consider SAT or ACT. So if you're applying to California state schools, then you probably don't need to take it, but schools outside of California, they're still optional and some are required. Let's see. For the Fiveable AP courses in spring, will there be discounts? I think that someone can help answer that within the chat. Let's see. A couple other things that we'll go over during the streams are we have kind of these like top 10 or like top 20 facts you should know for the math section, for the writing section, for the reading section, and we'll go through those so that you know, like, if you're cramming, what are the specific things you should try to make sure you remember. We're also going to go through, I think I saw this in some of the requests for what we would cover in the streams, how to approach the different reading sections, so like history passages or science passages, because there is actually a different strategy for how to go through history passage questions versus a science passage question versus a fiction narrative passage. And so we'll go through those different strategies, and hopefully that can be helpful. One other thing, we're also going to be doing 2 different math streams. So the first one will be an hour and a half long, and that one is going to cover basic math concepts that should cover about 70% of the math section. The second math stream will be about an hour long. That'll cover more advanced topics. And then the third reading and writing stream, that will be an hour and a half long, and we'll cover reading and writing strategies. If you're taking the test within 7 days, what can be done to improve a score? That's a good question. We recommend that you take a practice test, so they're available on the College Board. Identify the different areas where you're getting questions wrong. Maybe you're mostly getting questions in linear equations wrong, or maybe you're getting the graphing questions wrong, and then use our platform or use Khan Academy if you want to try both, and then just focus on practicing questions in that area. If you can just master one of those sections that you're really having trouble with, that's going to help increase your score. The streams are not going to be on Instagram, they'll be on Fiveable. Do you recommend writing the essay on the SAT since it's optional? So when you do the practice test, if you feel like your writing section you're doing really well, you're getting most of the questions right, then I wouldn't do the essay. Again, I would do the essay if you feel like you wanted that extra oomph in your score and you wanted to show that your writing skills are strong. What books do we recommend for the SAT? So the College Board honestly is going to be your best bet for practice tests, because they are the ones creating the test, and so their books are going to be most accurate. Kaplan is going to be a little bit harder than the SAT, so if you want to kind of over prepare, you can practice some of the questions there. But generally doing the College Board practice tests and going through their practice questions and then getting some support from our platform is a good way to balance studying. Since SAT streams are going to be a thing, is there a possibility of ACT streams coming out in the future? That's a good question. I am actually not sure. Our platform really focuses on the SAT, but we have seen that there's a lot of overlapping strategies, especially for reading and writing, and so you can kind of use both resources to prepare for both types of tests. But yeah. What do I think about the whole College Board as a scam thing? I mean, here's the thing. I think that, there's obviously a lot of issues with the SAT. We know that there's issues with equity with the SAT, with socioeconomic equity, with racial equity, but at the end of the day, it is an opportunity for you to show how much you know to colleges, especially if maybe you didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of extracurriculars, or your school doesn't offer a lot of APs or anything like that. And so it's kind of like the best bad solution that we have right now for standardized testing. I think that, it's a good opportunity. For me, I came from a public school in a random suburb in Georgia, and my SAT score was a chance for me to show schools that, I was able to handle this kind of content. Can I prepare for the PSAT by just preparing for the SAT? Yes, they are very similar. You can kind of prepare for both. Definitely preparing for the SAT in order to take the PSAT, like you'll be over preparing a little bit, which is good because you'll be setting yourself up to do well on the SAT too. What inspired me to create the platform I have, and what pushes me to keep going? That's a good question. I think for me, it started with the fact that my family actually came from China, and they came from a really rural area, and my parents didn't have a lot of educational resources. And then I came here, and the US is supposed to be more advanced and have more resources, but there's still so much inequity in education, and so that's what we're trying to fix. And we love supporting students. We love hearing that our content's resonating with students, so that's what keeps us going and what keeps us motivated. What about preparing for the SAT? Will it help with the ACT? Yes, because the reading and writing and math are going to be somewhat similar, but the ACT has a science section, which the SAT doesn't, so you do need to prepare for that separately. And the style of questions will sometimes be a little bit different, but you can use both. What other resources do we provide other than SAT prep? So we provide a lot of different resources in just understanding basic fundamental math concepts. So one thing that we've seen is that SAT prep is especially frustrating if maybe you weren't able to really master some skills in understanding negative numbers or exponents or something random in math. And so we've created interactive lessons on our platform that can help you understand those concepts in a really easy and almost fun way. So you should check those out. Tell us about how cool your practice questions are. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, we love our practice questions because we think that they are almost fun. They relate back to pop culture, movies, music, TV shows, books. We have grammar questions based on the Weekend lyrics. We have reading questions based on young adult novels. We have a lot of Marvel questions, which some people love and some people hate, but there's a little bit of everything for everyone. And yeah, I definitely recommend checking them out because they kind of provide a good way to study, but also take a break from what can be a very stressful process. I saw a Harry Potter question. I was so happy. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of my favorite things is when I see a student get really happy about a question. Whether it's I saw an Avatar the Airbender question someone told me the other day, and it made them really happy. Or I saw a question from Crazy Rich Asians and it made me really happy. Or I saw a question from Queen and Slim, someone told me the other day, that made them really happy. That's why we do this, because we want to make sure that all of you are able to have fun while you learn, and that it's not stressful and awful, but somewhat fun. Yeah, we like Avatar. We're really disappointed that Netflix wasn't able to make it work with the original creators. Super bumming, it's just a bummer, but what are you gonna do? We'll keep making questions based on that. Anyone else lagging? What kind of bender am I? I mean, I think that I would like to be, I don't really know. That's a good question. I feel like maybe waterbender. I feel like I'm pretty chill. I don't know, hard to say. I do kind of go on a roller coaster of emotions sometimes. It's tough. Oh, thank you, Sadiqa. Yeah, definitely check out Almost Fun. It'll be hopefully something interesting for you to use to study. Oh yeah, airbenders are definitely cool. But they're like very zen. I feel like, you've got to be very, very zen to be an airbender. This is taken a turn away from the SAT, but that's okay. Yeah, and keep sending in questions if you are typing out questions, if there's anything that I can help answer about our platform, about what we provide, about the streams next week. They'll be fun. Grace, our Chief Academic Officer, will also be joining me for them. She has been teaching for the last couple of years, and she's gonna help run those sessions. And yeah, she's great. She's awesome. Yeah, we are actually working on getting our Android app out soon. But if you're on an Android phone, you can't access our website on mobile. We've worked really hard to make sure that it's mobile compatible. How does Almost Fun compare with Khan Academy? That is a great question. So both of our platforms provide SAT prep, but if you go to Khan Academy, you'll see that their questions they're very close to what is going to be on test day. So that can be a good or a bad thing. It's a good thing if you're already, mastered a lot of the types of skills and you're just trying to optimize for like those last 100 or 200 points, then it's great. But if you're really still struggling with some of the concepts in the SAT and you need a little bit more help just understanding some of those concepts and skills, then our platform is an easy, lightweight way to study and build up those skills. So like if you doing a practice test are scoring somewhere in the like less than 1200 range, then our platform is a good way for you to like bulk up on those like core SAT skills before you go on and start doing the Khan Academy questions or the College Board questions. Why did we decide to invest into SAT prep? There is a lot of inequity in SAT prep. I was looking at Princeton Review the other day, and they have this little like banner that says, "We guarantee that you will get a higher score." And then in little tiny letters it says, "Yeah, but you have to like come in with a really high score already." Like I think it was 1400 you have to come in with in order to get a higher score. And that's the problem, right? Is that these platforms are really optimized for students who already have a ton of different resources, like private tutors or something that are helping them. And we wanted to make something that is for every student, any student who needed to study, and particularly students who might not have all of those resources available to them. Yeah, Khan Academy definitely has some content that's also not on the test. That's the other thing, is that you would be over preparing a little bit. We try to stick with, exactly what's going to be on the test, and more focusing actually on like what you'll more commonly see on the test versus the kind of maybe random 1 or 2 questions. Writing college essays. We have some really cool guides on our site to writing personal statements. If you go to almostfun.org, we think of writing a personal statement in the structure of like maybe your favorite movie or TV show, because the way that the plot works in like a Disney movie, for example, is actually very similar to how you want to structure a personal statement, this like journey of self investment and growth. And so we like to think of writing a personal statement as like you're sharing this journey of personal growth with the college admissions person, and you want to be vulnerable, and you want to be honest, and you want to be weird, and you want to be different, and that's what you want to put into your essay. And so we have guides on that that you should definitely check out. It's actually, if anyone watches Rick and Morty, the creator of that, Dan Harmon, he came out with this kind of story circle guide of how he thinks about every episode and like the journey that a character goes on of facing something that's a new challenge and learning from it and applying it. And that's very similar to how you want to think about a personal statement, is that you went through a challenge and you learned from it and you conquered your fears and you came out a better, stronger person. Where did I go to college? I went to Harvard. I graduated in 2016, and I studied math and computer science. And I really love math, and so part of what we're trying to do with Almost Fun is help more people love math, because math is not taught in the most fun way, but math is actually can be very fun and very creative and really interesting to learn. Yeah, there's good things about Ivy Leagues, and then there's good things about almost a lot of other colleges too, right? Ivy Leagues are definitely like pressure cooker environments. So I think be open about the college you want to go to. Your journey is your own. You don't need to feel pressure to go to a specific school. College is an amazing time, really, no matter where you go. You said before you came from a high school in the middle of Georgia. Do you think that mattered in your application to Harvard? I don't know. I mean, I think that I definitely worked really hard to stand out in my application. I think it was probably interesting that I come from a town where the biggest landmark is a 50-foot tall mechanical chicken that advertises a KFC. I think I actually put that in my essay. But again, like, the point of your applications and everything that you're doing for college is to be yourself. If the college doesn't want that, then they don't deserve you. So you should be as much yourself in your application as possible, because you want to show your true authentic self to the school, and they should appreciate that. Yeah, I think it's important. I mean, sometimes, let's see, there's one more question. Does it matter if you're super passionate about which school you go to, or is it the program? Yeah, I mean, sometimes it depends, right? Like, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was applying to college, so I didn't really know what to be passionate about. I didn't discover this passion for education until much later. I think if you are already really passionate about something, then definitely pick a school that's going to let you pursue that dream. But if you're not yet, then pick a school where the vibe matches your vibe, where like you're going to be able to join clubs or organizations that you would be really excited to join. Definitely do your research, right? I think that in some ways I'm really grateful that I went to Harvard, and then in some ways I feel like maybe there were parts of it that weren't great for me. And that I wish I could have been a little bit more intentional instead of just going for the brand name at that time. What would I say my spike was? What was the one thing that set me apart from everyone else? I actually remember my interviewer just telling me I was a very well-rounded candidate. So I was one of those candidates that didn't really have a spike, but was just kind of like well-rounded. Like, I did a lot of extracurriculars. I had good grades. I was student body president because no one else wanted to run, but they didn't know that, so I was able to put that on my application. But I think generally, I think that, in talking to admissions counselors now and advising students, you want to kind of think about what sets you apart instead of just being that well-rounded kid. Things have changed a lot since I was applying, and now it's really more focused, I think, on being unique and having something that is different about you that you're really interested in or passionate about. Can you tell us more about your role at Google Classroom? Yeah, so I was a product manager on Google Classroom. We were working on building new features on the platform for the students and teachers who were using it. I left because I wanted to specifically focus more on students who needed really more educational support and resources, and who were really experiencing the inequity in our system. But I learned a lot from Google. I learned a lot about how to work with other people, which is not always something you learn in school, and how to have discussions with people who might really disagree with you. I've been in like 2-hour meetings before where you just disagree and you don't get anything done, and you learn how to grow from that. How did I deal with the stress? That's kind of what I'm most curious about, because it's so crazy, scary, and overwhelming. Yeah, I did not deal well with stress in my first year of college. I think that I had far too high of expectations for myself, and being thrown into an environment where suddenly everyone is really, really smart, and is like very, very open about that, can be very intimidating. I think that I wish that I could have taken my own advice to just stick to, what was important to me, and how I wanted to grow, instead of constantly comparing myself to other people. That really is, I think, what brings out so much stress, is constantly comparing yourself to others when everyone's journey is their own. You know what I mean? Like, you will grow at your own pace, you will achieve things at your own pace. Comparing yourself to others is just it's not healthy, and it's not good. There's no point to it, even though it's really easy to do. It's more important to just focus on yourself. What did I look for in a school when deciding what colleges to apply to? Let's see. I was looking for a way to get out of Georgia. I was looking for a school that would kind of open up doors to new opportunities for me, and let me leave a place where I didn't feel like that I didn't feel was as inclusive as I wanted. And so I was really just focused on going somewhere that would open more doors for me. If I could go back, I think I would have looked for somewhere that had a stronger social impact initiative on campus. Harvard's not really that kind of place. I think like Yale, for example, is a school that really focuses on social impact a lot more. Berkeley is also a school that focuses on social impact more. That's something that I would have looked for more, honestly, instead of a school where everyone's kind of like looking out for themselves. Like there's a lot of bankers that come out of Harvard. Not that that's a bad thing, and everyone has their own reason for doing what they do, but there's kind of a culture of finding like jobs that are just gonna pay really well. What about culture shock and homesickness? Yeah, definitely. I didn't think I would, because my parents are pretty, they're like helicopter parents, so I thought I would be really excited to leave and go to college. But I definitely missed home. I definitely missed like the comfort of, there's just so much anxiety when you go into a new place. It's like the very little things of like, who am I gonna sit with at lunch now? To like, what club should I do? Or like, who's gonna be my friend in this whole new place? And I think a lot of my first year was trying to find my people, like the people that I was gonna want to spend time with, who were gonna be there for me, and like weeding out the people that weren't really gonna be there for me, and who I didn't want to be there for either. It's definitely a process. You're forced to grow a lot. I don't know that I have like concrete advice for dealing with that. I think just like leaning on the people you love, and hoping that they'll be there for you. Did I expect to get into Harvard? If I had good grades and was well-rounded, was it a big shock when I found out I was accepted? It definitely was a big shock. I mean, I did not expect it. I applied to a lot of schools because I didn't really have expectations. Like Harvard always felt kind of like a pipe dream. I thought it was a mistake when I got in first, because I had some issues signing into the website. But yeah, it was definitely a surprise. I think that, at a certain point, it's kind of like a crapshoot. Like, you work as hard as you can, but then part of it's just going to be like, how was the person reading your application feeling that day? Were they really hungry, or were they really tired? Like that, that affects it. So you work as hard as you can. You set yourself up so that you can take advantage of opportunities when they come your way. But you also have to be open to the possibility that might not be the path that you land on, and that's okay. Did I apply to Harvard as early decision or regular decision? I applied early. I think that was the first year they did early, and I applied early there, and then early to a couple other schools, because it wasn't that one that was like binding. It was the one where you could just apply early. But I do think I had a couple of friends apply to, I think early action is the binding one. And those, I think you have a higher chance of getting in when you apply early for those, because like you're committing in some ways. They're the only one you're applying to. That scares me. I feel like my whole life I'm going to wonder if I really earned my place, or if it was just chance, not gonna lie. I mean, a lot of life is chance, but like if you set yourself up to be able to take advantage of opportunities, then you earned it, right? the other thing is, like, sometimes you'll earn things that you might not get. That's really the other thing that happens. But if you set yourself up, when you get an opportunity and you're able to take advantage of it, you earned it. Don't worry about that. When should I start studying for the SAT? Like, what grade? I mean, you're kind of preparing for the SAT from like day one in a lot of ways, because you're using all those math skills constantly, like basic things like adding and subtracting negative numbers or multiplying and dividing by them. If you haven't mastered that, you might get some questions wrong on the SAT. So I think focusing on school and like working hard there is already going to help prepare you for the SAT. I would recommend, and this is what I did, is starting in 9th grade, I would like sign up to do like question of the day. So I'd like practice one question a day on a platform and just get in that practice and get in that experience. And then before the PSAT, I did some practice tests and studied. And then before the SAT, I studied like kind of hardcore for a couple of weeks, just doing practice tests and trying to make sure that that I knew the types of questions that I wasn't super confident in, and that I was prepared to handle them. What parts of the SAT do I think students have the most trouble on? Definitely math, I think, because it's really easy to end up spending a ton of time on one math problem that you feel like you're really close to getting, but then like maybe it's more confusing than you thought, or you're not sure how to best approach it because like there's 3 different ways you could think about it. And our recommendation is always just skip it, move on, and then come back to it at the end if you have time. What are some tips for the reading section? Yeah, we'll go over this in the stream next week, but we have 2 different strategies we recommend for reading, kind of depending on like how good your speed reading skills are. In general, we like don't want you to be reading the whole passage, and that means skimming. That also means recognizing, in particular in history passages, when they're just being super repetitive, and knowing to, skip to where new content is becoming available. So we'll go through a lot of different strategies for reading next week during the session, but the whole point is to get through it as quickly as possible so that you're able to get all the questions. Is the PSAT a good signal of where you're at for the SAT? Yeah, it's definitely a good signal, right? Like if you did super well on the PSAT, you're in good shape for the SAT, but you definitely still need to study specifically for the SAT. It's a good signal as to like if you're on the right track, or maybe if you need to do a little bit more work, but you still want to do concentrated SAT prep. Where do we get PSAT practice tests? Yeah, you can get them on College Board. They're available there. They also have SAT practice tests, which you can also take if you do all the PSAT ones. What are the perks to taking the SAT versus the ACT? So there's different types of questions on the SAT and ACT. The ACT also has a science section, so if you're a very quantitative person, if you're really good at like looking at graphs and thinking about data, the ACT gives you more opportunities to let that shine. The SAT, I think that it covers, the 3 different areas, reading, writing, and math, somewhat equally. And so it's, if you're a little bit more well-rounded, if reading and writing are some strengths of yours, then that's a good test to take. I took both for reference, and I did better on the SAT than I did on the ACT. I think if you have the opportunity, if you're able to, taking both gives you a chance to just see, which one is gonna look better for you. How should you pace yourself on the SAT? Yeah, I mean, we'll go over some timing strategies as well, but one thing you should definitely note is like the halfway point in the test and then the halfway point on the clock for you, and keep an eye on that, right? You want to make sure that you're not, only a third of the way done at the halfway point. If you are, then you want to speed up. But generally, you don't want to spend too much time on any given question. If you feel like you're spending more than like a minute or 2 on something, just thinking about how to get started, then skip it and come back. It's more important to get through the test than to answer every single question on the first pass. What is my study strategy? So the thing that we recommend doing is to first take a practice test so that you can kind of diagnose, where are your strengths, what are the areas that you need more support in, and then for the areas that you need some more support in, that's where you want to master those skills and really bulk up on practice of those skills. So our platform is a good place to do that. You can practice whenever you have a chance on the app or on the website, and it's really focused on skill building and helping you identify the different parts of the question to be aware of. And then as you master that, as you get more comfortable with it, then practicing the ones on Khan Academy can be really helpful. So you're kind of doing this like bulking up period, and then you're doing like some intense training on Khan Academy, and then you've like fully mastered that skill and you're ready for the SAT. What are good SAT snacks? That's a good question. Let's see. Brain food is good. I think like granola bars, carrots, those are good. I mean, I like junk food. That helps me. So like I eat a lot of like Cheetos and gummies, but to each her own. Whatever I think makes you kind of relax. The thing about carrots is that like you're chewing a lot. It's like how gum makes you chew a lot, and so like that I think activates like it's very much brain food. It activates your brain in some way or something. That's why they tell you to chew gum. Going back to pacing, I think the other thing is that you want to do as little extra reading as possible, whether it's in the reading section or it's in the writing section. The questions don't always make it super clear that you shouldn't be reading everything. They kind of make it seem like you should read the whole passage or you should read that whole paragraph, or like for writing, if they ask you a question like, how would you change the sentence to reflect the central idea of the passage? And then you're like, oh man, I gotta go read the whole passage now. Like, don't do that. There's ways to minimize how much you're reading so that you're saving time. How many times did I take the SAT? I took it twice. The first time I didn't get the score that I wanted, and so then I went back and I studied some more, got some more help, and then I took it again. And I think generally there's been studies actually that came out of I think Harvard that showed that even if you don't do any extra studying, taking it again is likely to increase your score, just because you're more comfortable and just because like you've done this before, right? Your anxiety is just going to be a little bit lower, and that's going to help you do better on the test. What is the purpose of having students take the ACT and SAT? They're just two different tests, and like it's basically, I think that the ACT came about later than the SAT, and they said that it was like more focused on critical thinking versus like prior knowledge. I don't really think that's true, but it was meant to just be an alternative for the SAT, which already had a lot of inequity issues. I'm nervous that taking the SAT too many times could possibly look bad for Ivies. I have never really heard that that's been an issue, that taking it too many times looks bad. To be honest, I think it shows that you're committed and that you can work really hard and learn from mistakes or learn from the experience and do better. So I don't think that should be something that you're worried about. I would say that you don't need to over optimize it too much. So we've talked to a couple of consultants who do this and help students apply to college, and really like your score is going to help indicate just like how good you are at some of these core skills, and then after a certain point it's not going to matter too much. Then they're really trying to understand your personality, and that's like the personal statement, that's going to be like the short answers on the applications. So don't like stress too much about the SAT is what I would say. Do I think the SAT is a good measure of someone's knowledge? No, it's definitely not. The SAT, like I think I talked a little bit about this earlier, it's like our best worst method of standardizing something across all students. But I mean, the guy who created the SAT, or the guy who created the new version of the SAT, he's talked a lot about how the test is based on like traditional literary Western canon, and that's really not super relevant to our lives today, right? Like, as a student, as a human in the modern world, you don't spend a lot of time analyzing and reading traditional literary canon. So it makes sense that that wouldn't be something that you would be super familiar with on the test, but that's not an indication of how smart you are. The main thing I think the SAT can show is how good you are at studying to a certain extent. But it's a game we all kind of have to play, honestly, at this point. The SAT cram sessions, there's going to be 3 next week. There's going to be 2 for math and then 1 for reading and writing. The first math one will be an hour and a half long, and we'll go over basic math fundamental concepts that cover about 70% of the test. The second math session will be an hour long, and that's going to cover more advanced math topics that cover about like 30%, the rest of the 30% of the test. And then the reading and writing section will cover reading strategies for the different types of passages, how to eliminate different answer choices, and the writing section will be focused on grammar rules that you should know, vocab you should know, and the strategies for looking at the effective language questions. Yeah, you can take the SAT and ACT as many times as you want. I think that with the fee waiver, you have a maximum of 2 or 3 times, I believe. But if you pay the fee to College Board and stuff, you can take it as many times as you want. But definitely, if you're worried about the cost, talk to your counselor about fee waivers. They should be able to help you apply and help you take the test. Would I recommend retaking the SAT just because you got a bad score on the essay? It kind of depends on what the score you got on the other sections was. I think generally a good score to kind of be in the range of is, so for any 4-year college, you want to be scoring at least 1,000. For the top tier, private universities, above a 1,400 is good. That's kind of what you should be aiming for. So if you feel like you need to take it again to get into the range that you want for the type of school that you're looking at, then you should take it again. And you can also find like the average scores on different schools' websites. They make that public of like in the last class, what was the average SAT score broken up by subject, and that can help you get an idea of what they're looking for. We don't currently have anything for subject tests. The main request we really get is just for more SAT prep questions and more math help. So if SAT subject tests are something that people want, let us know. We make it really easy to submit feedback, and we take student feedback really seriously. It's how we prioritize. It's how we decide what to create and build. What are the best resources for preparing for the SAT? So depending on your range, if you are scoring below a 1,200, our platform, almostfun.org, I am biased, but I think that it's the best platform to help you build skills and master the different concepts you need. If you're scoring above a 1,400 on the practice test, then you should be drilling the practice problems on Khan Academy and College Board, just over and over again in the areas that you're still getting wrong. That's going to be the best way to kind of bulk up on that skill. Do AP scores help with college admission? Yeah, definitely. They definitely help. They show that you're able to handle college level class, and they're another type of test in addition to the SAT that show your capabilities as a student. What if I do good on the math section first and study just reading and writing for the second time? Will it look bad if my math score goes down? I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that admissions officials are that careful about looking at your different sections each time, and you can super score, and that's really what they're looking at. And I think the fact that they do that means that they're more interested in how well you were able to prepare for each section, and in the end how well you did overall, not each specific time. I took 4 SAT subject tests. I also took a ton of APs. I wish that I had Fiveable when I was a student because I took so many AP classes. But yeah, there's a lot of testing as a high school student. It's hard. How many APs should we take for Ivies? I don't think that there's like a prescriptive number, to be honest, because some of it will depend on your school, and colleges don't really want to penalize you if like there weren't enough APs offered at your school. I took, I think, 19, which is insane, and don't do that. My partner, who also went to Harvard, he only took, I think, like 6. And so it's more important, I think, for the ones that you do well, and use platforms like Fiveable to make sure that you do well on them versus trying to just take tons and tons and tons. What is a subject test? So the SAT, they have their general SAT, which covers reading, writing, and math. And then they also have specific subject area tests. These are different from the AP exams, and they're not associated with like an AP class. They're just like subject area tests. So they have one for different areas in math. They have one for science. And so you can take those to just show like your mastery of those different subjects. But I'm not super familiar on how important they are for different types of schools, but I think that taking the SAT and having AP exams under your belt is enough to show your academic excellence. You don't need to overdo it with the testing. I think I definitely did, and it made my senior year very, very stressful. Oh, what should we do the night before the test? You should get a really good night's sleep. Trust yourself, trust the fact that you've studied and that you've done as much as you can, and just try to get a really good night's sleep beforehand. Don't do any studying the night before. If you feel like you really need to, go over like something easy and quick like vocab or something, like, find one of those lists. We actually have one for the top vocab you should know, or like the top grammar rules, and do like a quick read of that, but don't do too much studying. You want to give your brain time to rest and relax before you go into this very long test, right? So definitely take that time before. Let's see. Yeah, I think one thing that I did the morning of the SAT that I think is really, really important is to have like a really solid breakfast. Like, I'm not a breakfast person. I don't even eat breakfast now, but like before something like the SAT where you're sitting for that long and you have to be thinking for that long, make sure that you eat like a good breakfast. How many hours a week should you study? How many hours a day? I mean, it ranges depending on how long before the test you start to study. We recommend that like 3 to 4 months before you plan to take the SAT, to take a practice test and figure out, what are the areas of weakness that I have, and then plan to focus on each area over the course of the next couple of weeks. Like, give yourself a week for each of the areas that you're struggling with. That way you can really master it and make sure that you're well prepared. And then at the end of the 3 months, make sure that you do a couple more practice tests, do a review of everything that you've studied over the course of the last couple of months, and that way you can be really sure that you've prepared as much as you can. Do I recommend any programs to add to your graphing calculators before the test? No, I don't think so, and I actually recommend that you use the graphing calculators as little as possible. Like, even in the calculator section, you really don't need a calculator for most of them, and you're going to potentially waste time like inputting it and trying to like use it, versus if you know the concept, then you're able to just do it. Like, I really think that the only time that you really need the calculator is if there's like pretty complicated calculations. Like, if you have to do like 19 times 18 or something and you don't want to write that out, then you should use a calculator. But most of the questions do not really require a calculator, and it'll be faster if you remember the concept and are able to do it. Which SAT book do I recommend the most? They're all somewhat similar in that they're kind of focused on like memorization and drilling practice problems. I think that College Board is the one that is going to be most helpful, just because like they are the ones who create the test. Some of them, like Kaplan, index is a little bit too hard. Some of them index a little bit too easy. But I think they're all somewhat similar in the type of studying they want you to do. And if you're having issues with it, if it's not really helping you do better, then our platform is a good place to help build up those skills before trying to tackle the practice problems. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left on this live stream. So any last burning questions before we close out? Otherwise, I'm excited to see some of you next week. It's going to be fun. Like I said, Grace, our Chief Academic Officer, will be there, and we're excited to help you guys study. Okay, last question here. What was your study schedule as a sophomore? So I took the SAT, I want to say, in August, and I did most of my studying over the summer. So basically, I think like beginning of June, I took a practice test. So this was like 2 or 3 months before I took the test. I took a practice test. I figured out like there were some areas where I had special weaknesses. Like I was really bad at geometry generally. I don't know why, it's just always been kind of hard for me. So I made sure to spend a couple of weeks just drilling geometry practice problems. And then I also was just making lots of careless errors, especially in math, like with basic computation, with like not reading the problem correctly. And so I kept doing practice tests to get myself in the habit of reading the question carefully, of not missing different pieces of it, of not reading it completely. And then that was about 2 or 3 weeks of studying, doing a couple practice questions every other day, maybe like 3 or 4 times a week, and then on the weekends trying to do like maybe an hour or so of practice. August of my junior year. Yeah. When is the juiciest time to take the SAT? So I don't know how many of you have like in-school SAT dates. That's definitely a good time to take it because you're setting aside school time and you're able to do it then, and it's not an additional commitment you have to make. I know in New York that day is in March, so you're able to take it then. I'm not sure about some of the other states. But generally you want to take it if you want to be preparing ahead of time. You want to take it junior fall or junior spring, so that you have time to take it again if you need to. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. I've had a great time. I'm sorry it's gotten like progressively darker in my apartment as we've gone on, and now I'm just like sitting in the dark, and I hope that it's still clear. But thank you all for coming. I've had a great time talking to you all, and I am excited to see some of you in the session next week and for you all to meet Grace. Thank you all. Bye.